Today we're going to drive a Honda Insight with a 47 amp hour, 10 kilowatt hour lithium conversion. This is the 60S LIBCM FoMoCo kit. I haven't actually started selling it yet, but when I do, it's essentially done. I don't really see any other hardware changes happening. And we are also going to be using the manual IMA controller that I'm developing, but I have not released yet. This is a prototype manual IMA controller. Here's how I'm using this controller with my right hand. First of all, we have a mode select switch here. This is a 3-position switch that can be programmed to do pretty much anything in the 3 different modes. Right now I have it to where when it's in the middle here, that's the OEM mode, so all the OEM signals are passed through. And when you move either this potentiometer or push this button, nothing happens. If we go up into the top right now, this is the mode that I use 99% of the time, and this basically is a manual IMA mode. This button, my main goal with it is to add an IMA electronic cruise control. Right now I have a similar version of it, which we'll look at here when we drive. The other mode right now, basically a manual mode, except that the assist commands from the ECM are passed through as well. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna drive up Lookout Mountain. It's about 1,000 feet of elevation change. And then we're going to drive a 20-mile round trip, basically on top of Lookout Mountain, and then we'll come back down it in about 10 miles. You can see I've been driving this around town. I've driven 490 miles so far on this tank of gas, and I've averaged 141.2 miles per gallon. You can get much, much higher than that if you're only driving short trips. I tend to drive a lot of longer trips, you know, a couple of hours round trip. So that's kind of why my mileage is a little bit lower. One thing is that 150 miles per gallon is the most that the car will display when you're in the miles per hour. I'm gonna probably start this trip in the miles per gallon because we are gonna be driving uphill, which means that we're not gonna be getting above this 150 miles per gallon. One other caveat before we start driving, this is going to be a long video. I will probably compress certain sections of it. This is really for people who are curious about the driving experience, which is one of the reasons this video is in portrait mode. I'm trying to get both the manual controller here, my foot position down here, and then also the gauges here, and then just to see out, because otherwise it would just be a boring video. So we're gonna go ahead and we'll start the car here, like so. I'm gonna actually auto stop the car right now, which I can just do whenever I want now, which is pretty nice. But anyway, as soon as you go back into gear, it's going to start back up. All right. So again, we are in the OEM mode right now, so we're able to apply assist and regen however the car sees fit. I don't actually use this mode a whole lot. I prefer to put it into manual mode, which I'm going to do now by flipping this switch towards me here. When I do that, I'm now in manual mode, so the car won't give assist or regen at all, ever. That is a mode you're welcome to use. I can now use this manual controller to apply assist and regen. You can see we're getting horrible mileage starting out this trip here. It just kind of is what it is when you're driving uphill in the beginning. But I've taken my foot off the gas pedal, and I'm now driving fully electric. I'm doing 20.5 kilowatts right now. On the electric motor. And again, right now we're driving up 1,000 feet vertically in just, you know, 1.5 miles. This is probably a better served hill in second gear. So you can see here that in second gear, I'm at a higher RPM, but I'm also able to accelerate more quickly, which makes sense or whatever. One thing in general is that I find that I tend to stay in lower gears than I used to. So this is kind of on the high end of what I would do for second gear. I'm gonna go up to third here and kind of accelerate. One thing you do have to limit with the 60S configuration, you have to limit the amount of power you output when you're below about 1,700 RPM, because otherwise you'll get a current fault flag. If you go above about 10 kilowatts, and it's not quite 10 kilowatts, it's a little bit more than that, but I am ultimately going to have to write some limitations on this manual IMA controller here so that it cannot apply full power at lower RPMs. Now there is a fix for that that Peter has figured out. There's basically a signal from the IGBT driver, which is the power stage that actually drives this motor. And you can basically modify that signal to where the MCM is not going to see the overcurrent fault, and therefore it's not going to disable the IMA system. That's, you know, you can fix this in firmware as well, but it just means you have to limit the power output at lower RPMs. So I tend to basically stay in the high 2000s, maybe low 3000s at this point. So we're almost to the very top at this point. So right now I'm driving fully electric, and I've kind of been on and off. Going up that hill, I've been on and off. You can see we used like probably 8% of our state of charge. We are now at 76% state of charge getting to the top there. So again, I'm fully electrically driving right now. You might have noticed that while I'm shifting through the gears initially, I am having to give the vehicle gas. You know, you can't start from a dead stop with the electric motor here because the electric motor is permanently attached to the engine. So it's just not a possibility in this car. And at this point, now that we're at the top of the mountain, we'll probably be doing electric from here on out for the rest of the trip, unless we come across a few stop signs, which we will. So one thing, notice I'm regenning at 5 kilowatts going 1200 RPM. There's some people have had some questions about, you know, does regen still work? It absolutely still works. It's just not quite as powerful at lower RPMs because the pack voltage with 60S is, you know, 25% higher. In general, probably up to about 30 miles per hour, maybe 32, 33 miles per hour. I will probably just stay in second gear. Of course, your own driving styles, you know, there's a million ways to drive a car, obviously. So you can see at this point, you know, we've driven up 1,000 feet vertically, and we've driven 4.5 miles, and we're at 102.6 miles per gallon. I could have done that quite a bit better if I had stayed in second gear and just fully used electric. You'll see as we keep going, it ultimately doesn't really matter. We're going to get insane mileage here. I did just shift up into third gear, you know, right around that 2000. You want to stay above 2000 RPM basically to use this well, is kind of what I've figured out. All right, so the speed limit is just hit 50 now, so we're going to go ahead and accelerate. And at 50 miles per hour is probably when you're going to switch into fourth gear. It really just depends. But you know, in third gear, it's still fine. Because I still have a little bit of uphill here, I'm going to stay in third gear for now. So one thing I wanted to show off here is that I don't have to keep holding my finger down here. You know, if I let go, you can see the assist goes away, but actually I have a button here that will just hold a specific value. So I'm going to set this to say 8 kilowatts, and then just push that button, and you can see that now I'm just going to have a continuous 8 kilowatts of assist, which doesn't make sense. You can see I'm going downhill, and of course I'm speeding up. I can always just push that button again. I can also brake. Eventually I'll be able to push in the clutch and do a bunch of other safety checks. But you can see here that I'm going 10 over. I want to slow down. I'm going to start pulling backwards on this, and it's kind of hard to show it in frame, but I can pull backwards now, and I can just regen, of course. And I can regen strong if I want. That's 5.5, 6 kilowatts. So you can see also that we're at this 150 miles per gallon now. And again, this display won't display more than 150 miles per gallon. So we need to actually change our display, which I'll do here. So one of the things I'm going to do again is I'm going to just set this 9 kilowatts of assist like that so that it can stay there. And then I'm going to go ahead and change this into liters per 100 kilometers. And so we are currently getting 1.4 liters per 100 kilometers. And so hopefully by the end we can you know, blow that out of the water. Again, the 1,000 foot of vertical elevation from the get-go means we can only catch up from here because it's all downhill from here. So you can see we're just putzing along all day, 8.5 kilowatts of assist. Note that we can do 8.5 kilowatts of assist for an hour with a 10 kilowatt hour pack. So eventually what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this behavior so that instead of being a constant current that we apply when we push this button, we'll actually be applying a constant speed. So it'll basically be electronic cruise control, which is really, really nice. So one thing here, I'm going to be turning right here on Nickajack Road, And I can slow down with just the IMA instead of braking if I want, which is nice. And now we're going to begin our downhill here, where we're going to drop a lot of that elevation. Okay, so up here we're coming to a stop, and we were originally going to take a left to head back home, but we still have 61% of our battery life, so I want to use the whole pack so you can see the behavior. So we're actually going to just go right here, add some mileage to our trip. You can see we've driven 22.5 kilometers so far. And at this point out, we're going to be basically driving on flat land. So at this point, I haven't used my foot on the gas pedal in several miles. And again, for the duration of this trip, it's very unlikely that I will, except for stop signs, traffic lights, etc. Once you're moving, you really don't need the gas pedal unless you just hit a really steep hill or you're in the wrong gear and you don't want to downshift. All right, so we just hit 50% state of charge. So we're down to 0.6 liters per 100K. All right, so we are coming up here on a stop sign, and we're at 44% SOC. Seems like a good spot to turn around and see if we can make it home on the remaining 34% state of charge that we have. So I'm giving it full assist. If I want to accelerate faster, I can just mash on the gas pedal and of course accelerate, get up to speed there. So many people have complained that this potentiometer here is over $100, and it's a valid critique. You know, if you're doing, you know, how do I save as much money as I possibly can? That's a valid critique. But if you're doing, wow, this switch feels really, really nice and it's gonna work forever because it has no moving parts in it except for the actual button, which doesn't connect to a wiper. It actually uses a Hall effect sensor with a magnet, so there's no actual electrical sliding mechanism like there is with a standard potentiometer. If you're in the latter camp there, like I am, where safety critical stuff to you is important, which it is for me and certainly for products that I sell, I don't think $100 is that much to ask. I really do think that once you feel this potentiometer, it'll make sense. Once again, I've enabled the push button continuous assist feature, which will eventually be push button cruise control. Okay, so we just hit 30% state of charge, and starting around 30%, you're gonna start to see the amount of assist that you can apply decrease. And that's because as the battery discharges, the internal resistance, the ESR or whatever, increases. And so if you hit it with 100 amps, the cell voltage can actually drop quite a bit, you know, and drop, say, even below 3 volts. So we do start tapering off the amount of assist below about 30%. To overcome that, basically. You can still see that right now at 30%, we're doing 17.5 kilowatts. That will basically just linearly decrease. When you get down to like below 20%, which we'll see in a minute, you're limited to maybe, I don't know, 10 kilowatts, and then it picks up pretty quickly after that. You know, by the time you get to 12, 13% state of charge, you're only able to apply a few kilowatts. I don't remember exactly. We'll probably see it. We might get back before emptying the pack all the way, we'll see. All right, so you can see here I'm doing about 60 miles an hour, and I'm using about 14 kilowatts, which is about what I would expect on flat ground. So I'm not using the gas pedal. I'm also not using the potentiometer because I have it just set to output continuously 14 kilowatts. You can see that now that we're at 22% state of charge, we're limiting the power to 11 kilowatts. And of course, that's just going to keep dropping as the pack gets more and more empty. So if I go into the regular mode here, you can see that, yeah, sure enough, we are getting regen just like we normally did, and we'll use that regen to slow us down. I am also going to drop down into second gear here. 25 miles per hour is certainly second gear territory. So at 13% state of charge, 3 kilowatts, this is almost flat road, and I'm still not using the gas pedal. There's still no one behind me. We're gonna finish this trip on even smaller roads here, getting back to my house. And that way we can just fully use this pack up. All right, so we're at 13%. Let's go home. This isn't new behavior, but I do at least want to point it out. Even when the pack is very low, if you haven't been providing assist, you can briefly apply a lot more than, say, the 2 kilowatts you would normally get at 12% state of charge. All right, so we've dropped to 11% here, and I am having to give it gas at this point for the last, 1,000 feet or whatever until we get home. Just because the 1 kilowatt we're limited to at 11% state of charge is not enough to be useful to drive, but it is, I do need that 1 kilowatt to be able to get up my driveway. So we're gonna do that now. So that is the state of the 60S 47 amp hour FoMoCo setup. I'm super excited about this project. It's been really, really fun to change the drivability of this car. At this point, I could not go back. The OEM driving experience with the nickel metal hydride battery, it doesn't make sense to me anymore how I enjoyed that for so long, how I enjoyed this car, because I enjoy driving this so much more than I did before. Okay, so we drove 39.5 miles, and the 150 miles per gallon is not accurate. As I mentioned before, this car can only display up to 150 miles per gallon. We drove 63.7 kilometers, and we got 0.5 liters per 100K, which is 470 miles per gallon.